Welcome to the new year. It's 2022, and you've chosen to spend some of your early hours of this brand new year with me, Angela Ruggiero, the host of the Fluid Fan podcast. Thanks for being here. Always a pleasure to welcome new guests and new listeners to the Fluid Fan podcast, where as CEO and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab, our job is to enable the industry, the sports industry, to be a better version of itself. That's our vision. We're really trying to help the industry do more, do better, but be informed in all the hard work you guys have to do each and every day. It's our job to just listen to the market, understand the market, and then you guys have to go take that, put it into practice, all you practitioners out there. So excited that you are spending some time with us here on the Fluid Fan podcast, learning about the future of sport, learning about the future fan. We call it the Fluid Fan, learning about fan behaviors and how fans are changing. They change every day. So thanks for being here. Hope you had a great holiday season and a great new year. Big things to come in 2022. So to kick things off appropriately, I have an amazing guest today. If you don't know her, you should. Kathy Carter, the CEO of LA28 and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic properties, is here to talk innovation and global sport. Kathy is a former collegiate soccer standout. She was a goalie. You'll hear all about that. A founding member of Major League Soccer and definitely a prominent voice in the global soccer community. So if you play soccer or football, as the rest of the world calls it, you know Kathy Carter's name. But she has this amazing background, extensive background really in marketing, and has been recognized on numerous occasions for her work throughout our industry. So on today's podcast, you're going to hear all about how Kathy and her team are really working to shape the future of the Olympic Games. She wants to bring not just innovation, but pre-legacy and post-legacy, the work that she's doing as CEO of that group. How do they enrich the city, leave a positive legacy for everyone that touches it? So Kathy understands that the world is watching, and she's got a few years left on the time horizon. Again, it's 2022. You got about 6 years left. But we're going to hear all about what Kathy's aspirations are for the Olympic Games. And I feel lucky to have had this conversation with her. My prior role was actually as Chief Strategy Officer for the LA Olympic bid. Once we actually won those rights, had to hire a brand new team to go and activate. So that's where Kathy Carter, the leader that she is, comes in. She's going to lead the way to a positive 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games right around the corner. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome Kathy Carter on today's edition of the Fluid Fan podcast. Welcome to the Fluid Fan podcast with one of my favorite people in the world who's absolutely changed the game. You heard it already. Kathy Carter, thanks for being on the show with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting times in our world.
Lots going on. You have a little bit of a longer horizon than most CEOs in the sports and entertainment space, which I want to get into. You can do strategy. You can think long-term, big, bold. But before we dive into what you're doing, obviously with LA28, I always want to give our listeners a perspective of where you came from and what your background is. And there's a lot of people that want to be Kathy Carter. So walk through, I'm going to list some accolades just to set the temperature. Founding member of Major League Soccer. You were a goalkeeper, by the way. You still hold the record at your university for goals against average. U.S. representative on FIFA Committee for Women's Football and the FIFA Women's World Cup. Wise Women of the Year, 2-time Sports Business Journal 40 Under 40. Member of the Forbes list of the most powerful women in sports. I mean, I could literally keep going on. You're a badass. You're awesome. You are changing the world with everything you do. Walk me through your background. Why sports? Obviously, you came up through the soccer ranks, but how did you get to be the CEO of the LA 2028 Olympics?
Well, let me start by just putting a plug in for women's athletics. I came of age, and I like to say I'm a Title IX baby. So I was born just before Title IX was passed in 1972. And really growing up outside of Washington, D.C., which I think was a place where the adoption of equality in women's sport, and I would say the aspiration of equality, was perhaps an earlier adopted focus. I never was told I couldn't play. And so whether that was soccer, obviously, which became my chosen sport, or it was basketball, or it was just anything, there was just opportunity where I grew up for girls to participate in sport. And I grew up in a family that was very athletic, and therefore the idea of participating was never a question. It was how much and what would I do. And obviously I excelled in soccer and had a terrific, and still to this day, I can look at my phone right now and have, 2 or 3 different text chains, whether it's my college teammates, or it's even my growing up as a kid teammates, where we're still in touch. And the journey through youth soccer and then ultimately to university was something that I think is a defining component of who I am, and just that what you learn. And Angela, better than anybody else, it's what you learn being a part of the team is that it is a we, not a me. And I think that there's just so many incredible life lessons that I think have served me pretty well as I've gone into the business side of things. It was also the place where I started to understand that sport was more than just a passion to play. There was also a business that was a growing business. And I went to the College of William and Mary, and Mark McCormick, who is, for those listeners who are perhaps younger, may not remember Mark, but he is really sort of the grandfather of sports marketing and the founder of ING, and was, like I said, a graduate of the College of William and Mary, and was always very good about giving back his time, and would come back and speak to the college athletes about his journey and what he did, and sort of the first indication to me also about paying it forward. But we all kind of came out of listening to Mark, and we're like, oh, of course I want to work in sports. And then we all graduated, and we're like, well, how do you do that? So that was not the easiest way to think through that. That was in the early 90s. And fortunately, I did get a chance to start working in 1993 for the World Cup Organizing Committee for the FIFA World Cup, when we hosted the games here in 1994. And that started my journey in sports. So everything, the beginning of my career, everything was all about sports and the people who I was involved with. That sort of opened doors for me. But and then I just took it and ran with it.
I love it. I was actually in Pasadena for the celebration of that, because I grew up in LA, and there were like people were crowd surfing, and I don't know, it's so cool to be a part of that as one of your first entrees into sports. I want to dive in a little bit about what you said about what you learned as an athlete, and obviously a team sport athlete, and how you're applying that in your leadership role now at LA28. Because I love talking about, we could talk about a whole separate podcast on why sport is that platform for life. And I'd love to learn a little bit, like, what did you really learn? What are the lessons in your sporting career that just like won't get out of your head? Maybe something a coach said, or just something that you learned through adversity that now you're again applying to this big global organization that you're building with LA28.
Well, I think you hit on it, adversity. I think that as a young person, you're in a cocoon, right? Your parents are raising you, and hopefully you're getting a lot of positive accolades as a result of that. But in sport, you're going to lose some games, and you're going to make mistakes on the field, and you're going to also score goals or save goals or do all these great things. And so it's this constant sort of microcosm. And again, better than anybody, Angela, you also recognize that you cannot win by yourself. Mm-hmm. You can screw up and you can cost the team a game, but you can't win by yourself, at least in team sports. You can have a big impact on it. But at the end of the day, you really do learn and not to pull an old adage from the ABC Wide World of Sports, but you do truly start to understand the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And I think as a young person, to learn that in something that isn't terminal, like it's a game, like, okay, we're not curing cancer here, but to learn that at an early age, and the disappointment perhaps of not being chosen for a team or not being chosen for a role on the team. It's all of these things that ultimately, as you become an adult, it's just incredible then how you can manage the both ups and downs of the day that you go through and recognize that it's all part of the journey. And again, I can't say there was any one moment where that penny dropped for me, or that I even knew that as a young child or as a kid going through. I mean, my mom used to always say to me, "You're building character." I'd say, "Mom, I got enough character. I just want to win." And she's like, "That's just not the way it rolls." And I tease her now about it because I don't think she was saying that to me as giving me this great advice, but rather just to encourage me to keep going. And I think that was really incredible. And as proof positive as we get into business, the same things hold true.
Totally. Yeah, you talk about failure. I remember I was a goalie too. I don't know if you knew that in soccer. And I let in that one shot my freshman year, and all the upperclassmen, I'll never forget that. Like, all right, you got to pick yourself back up and rebound and put that goal aside, right? What's the next shot you can face? So character definitely has built you, Kathy. I've gotten to know you through not only the LA28 work, but now you serve on our women's leadership board and all the work that you're doing in international sports, which, as you know, I spent a few years. But I want to, before we dive into LA28, I just want to touch on, you mentioned McCormick and kind of soccer and your role with Soccer United Marketing. You spent, I think almost 15 years there, raised all the way up to be the president of that. What was that organization for our listeners that aren't familiar with all the work you did with Major League Soccer and the exposure you got to kind of this big global sport? And what did you do to enable, I guess, over those 15 years? What were some of the key milestones that you're most proud of?
We launched the league, Major League Soccer, in 1996, and I left and ended up coming back after spending 4 or 5 years at the league, and came back after a couple of year hiatus when the owners made a determination that the sport of soccer was really, there was just so much that would go on, and you can watch it today. You can get up early in the morning and watch the Premier League. You can watch Major League Soccer. You can watch the NWSL on the women's side. You can watch the Mexican League. I mean, there's this cacophony. There's just incredible tapestry of events and leagues and just stuff that happened in the sport of soccer. And the owners of Major League Soccer at the time said, if we don't figure out a way to be in the middle of all of it, to create some order to the chaos, we won't be able to grow the game domestically in the United States at the time in a way that we can continue the evolution and the growth. And so they made a determination to create basically a commercial company that would start to aggregate the majority of rights in the United States and represent those to the business community, whether that be for sponsorship or licensing or content or the like. And they created that company called Soccer United Marketing. At the time, at the height of that organization, we managed, obviously, the MLS rights. Also managed the World Cup media rights. We owned and produced the 2002 and 2006 World Cup and sold all the advertising for that. We owned the rights for the U.S. national team, so the U.S. soccer teams, the men's and the women's, the Mexican national team, then the regional governing body of soccer called CONCACAF. So essentially, you were able to say that at the end of the day, if a game was being played in the United States or a ball was being kicked, we were somehow involved in it. And it allowed us to actually scale the organization in a way that became very additive to the sport and became a really, really driving force to the economic development of those years, to Major League Soccer. And still, it exists still today, but ultimately, I think MLS is much bigger now and has tremendous commercial value on its own right. But it was a terrific learning experience. It gave you really a global perspective of all of the myriad of acronyms that exist throughout the world of soccer. And that sort of gave me a great training ground, if you will, to lead into what I'm now doing with the Olympic and Paralympic movements.
You're giving me flashbacks, the acronym world of learning this ecosphere and what they all mean. And I said that I joined the IOC in 2010. I was like, I need a handbook of the acronym. So you're in it. I love that, again, walking our listeners through, like, you took an asset of soccer and really were able to help give it a platform and commercialize it in a way that allowed it to grow. And you're essentially doing that now for LA28. Throw a couple figures out there. $7 billion Olympic budget, pretty nice. Big opportunity, big revenue that you need to then drive, obviously. But I want to start with a quote as we pivot now to talking about LA28. When you were named CEO earlier in this year, good job, Casey Wasserman, by the way, is a good call. You said, "I'm honored and humbled and more energized than ever to co-create a games that will unite us as a local and global community while celebrating the beauty of our differences. The LA28 Games present an incomparable opportunity to showcase what's good in the world and what's great about the LA community. I'm inspired to be part of this tremendous progress and what you're going to create." So I just want to give you props because I'm so excited for what you're going to do, and you're absolutely the right person for the job. And having spent 8 years in the IOC, and as you know, I was the chief strategy officer for the LA Olympic bid, to know that it's in your hands to take us into the future. I'm just chomping at the bit to get into like sharing with our audience, what does that future look like with this beautiful platform and someone of your status that has like such a great background and wants to do good, wants to use the Olympics and the platform that you have. If you've never heard the pitch, if you don't know what LA28 is going to be, give us the pitch. What's the future of LA28?
Well, LA is such a remarkable community and is actually purpose built for the Olympic and Paralympic Games by virtue of just the secret sauce. In some respects, we've got UCLA and USC that are about 11 miles apart, two world-class institutions that have world-class facilities. Add that with all of the facilities we have here in Los Angeles, whether that is downtown LA, what's happening in Inglewood and across the entirety of Southern California. And so we don't have to spend our time building, which so many municipalities that host the games actually have to build an infrastructure to host the games. We have the ability to actually fit the games to our community. And as a result of which, we can actually focus on what do we do as a result of hosting the games, and how do we actually have an impact that goes beyond the hosting of the games. We always say, if all we do is host the games, we will have missed our moment to actually have an impact.
But I think, real quick, I think that's a really important statement because, to your earlier point, most Olympics, they're obsessed with just delivering the games. And then they're like, "Whew, we delivered on time and on budget," as they say, as we joke about. Like, okay, that's like status quo in some ways, right? I mean, I just want to reiterate, like, that's not your vision. Your vision is, yes, of course, we're going to deliver on time and on budget, but above and beyond that, what does that look like?
Yeah, and I think we've looked at it and said, the games themselves provide us the tapestry on which to paint. And so, in fact, number one for us, it's been about how and what do we do to make sure we can pay for them, which I think we're off to a really good start in sort of all of the revenue generation components of what we have to do. And then we're setting up an organization that can deliver the games. And then the final piece, like you've mentioned, is the impact. And so, we're looking at it in terms of, obviously, we spent and committed an awful lot of money to make sure that kids in Los Angeles will have an opportunity to play. I mean, one of the great barriers of entry to youth sports in today's day and age is actually money. Mm-hmm. And, what happened to the days when we were growing up, Angela, where you just went outside and you played, right? You just played. Whatever the game was, you played it. And it's just not the way kids do things today. And it's a massive industry. And so we recognized that and said, we'll commit $160 million before we host the games in 2028 to make sure that kids in the city of LA actually can have an opportunity to participate. So we're really proud of this Play LA program that we set up with the city, which will give more kids an opportunity as a result of the games to actually participate. So that's one of the things we really think we can have an impact on young people. Number two, clearly, we think we can showcase how to host an event of this size and scale and just the sheer magnitude in a way that doesn't have an impact on the planet. And so when we think about environmental sustainability, we think that there's a real chance not to just buy energy credits, but to really change the narrative of how and what you do to host a sustainable games. Number three, we think that we can truly have an impact from an equity and inclusion perspective around job creation. We'll scale to be 5,000 plus people in our organizing committee, but more importantly, will impact hundreds of thousands of either permanent or temporary jobs. And so how do we actually make sure that those are that we have opportunities to actually impact those that are perhaps lesser served in our community. And then beyond that, we want to make sure we feature the best of what LA is, which is this wonderful tapestry and amalgamation of individual cultures and all coming together to create perhaps, and not just perhaps, but what is the most diverse city on the planet. And just sheer magnitude of languages spoken, cultures, that is the beautiful part of Los Angeles, is how do we lean into that as opposed to say that that's a negative. That's actually our greatest asset. So that's a start of some of the things we think about. And ultimately, we think we have a shot to leave a legacy that goes beyond that, to keep a lot of these programs going after we close the doors.
Yeah, I love it. Your pre-legacy, youth sports, you've got this sustainability piece, which we all know. We were just with Dow last week, like they're big in sustainability. Who are the different groups leading the charge to make sports that platform to show what's possible in smart cities as an example? Love it. Equity, inclusion through your jobs program or your leadership, or, just all these notes, as resonate in my head. I'm like, yes. It's not just the stats and the scores and the athletes and just the performance. It's really sport as a platform for change. And that's what I'm hearing you say. And so much more. I know LA84 has had an impact since 84. And it's, I think probably the city of LA is excited to see post 2028, what that new foundation might look like, that new, opportunity will look like to leave that lasting legacy. So, yeah, keep up the great work. I want to turn to do all this. You need money. I mean, let's be honest. You're in charge, as you were previously in the CRO position, now CEO, but nonetheless, it's your job to bring in those big checks at the local organizing committee level. You've already had some early successes. Maybe you can walk us through who some of those partners are and what's really the value prop that you're working with these partners on to use. Again, the Olympic platform, the city of Los Angeles is their canvas for what's possible in sport.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we set up our revenue organization about 3 years ago, and I'd say it's now operating at full tilt. But early successes were announcing Delta right before the pandemic, which who would have thought. We announced Comcast, Salesforce, Deloitte. We, as commercial partners, we've got a litany of licensees led by Nike and Ralph Lauren. And then we also did a really, really big and what we think will be transformational deal with On Location around how to manage the hospitality experience, which was a collaboration between ourselves, Paris and Milan 26 and the IOC, to actually figure out a way to consolidate all those rights together and actually bring one provider in, which has a huge impact on us from an economic stability perspective, but even more so, I think, in terms of what we'll be able to deliver for the myriad of stakeholders for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. All of that is to say, we've started to really, I think, make some interesting evolutions. But one of the things we did early on was we also did a joint venture with NBC Universal, where we came together so we could actually offer joint packages, if you will, between sponsorship and media. So we can actually provide a more seamless one-stop shop for people who want to integrate with the games. But and sort of the premise behind that, and we're seeing that with all of the partners we're bringing on, is how do they help us actually co-create and deliver these games? And I think that's the piece that we continue to unpack with NBC, with all these partners, and with all the conversations that we're having out there today, is how do companies actually, we don't need to say we did all of this. And it's actually we should be the community and all the partners and everyone that we actually participate with in terms of how we actually deliver the vision of what the LA28 Olympic and Paralympic Games can be. And so that's been a real thought-provoking part of our conversation, certainly at the outset. And we've had a number of companies that have stepped ahead and said, we don't want to just help you with the economics. We actually want to lean in and help you deliver these games.
I love that. I want to learn more and maybe dive in a little bit here. It is a big transformation when you're hosting the Olympics and Paralympics, having a sponsor that isn't just writing a check, but in a meaningful way, bringing their technology to bear. I mean, that's what we study, as you know, each and every day at Sports Innovation Lab. How are these partners coming in, bringing a capability, supporting an activation, getting you closer to those fans, getting you closer to the athletes, whoever in your ecosystem, that's important to you and your partner. So are there any, I mean, sky's the limit. You got many years ahead of you to plan activations or but maybe you can touch on maybe some of the deals you've already struck, maybe with Salesforce or Delta, that again allow you to take their unique capabilities and don't mix sponsorship we say a lot, don't be data driven when you're thinking about your partners. Don't just look at the check, look at the VIK, look at the other things they're going to bring to that team at the end of the day. So I'm curious, you have many years to plan what that would look like, but I'm sure some of them today are already helping your team out, your athletes out. And what do those look like?
Well, you mentioned Salesforce, and I would say Salesforce and Deloitte in combination. What we identified very early on, which was a part of that discussion, was there wasn't very much, and talk about data, there wasn't a tremendous infrastructure in the Olympic and Paralympic movements here in the United States, or for that matter, even on a global level, where we truly understand who our customer is, and therefore, how do we actually serve that customer more effectively? And whether that's with content that they have an aspiration, or with information around a sport that they are more interested in. And so we have embarked on a platform with Salesforce and with Deloitte's help as well, from a data and from a technology standpoint, to truly start to determine how do we, and by that I mean not just the Team USA and all of the various NGBs, national governing bodies that participate, how do we build an infrastructure that allows for the collective? And certainly as we think about LA, where we'll have a big event with a lot of fans and a lot of ticket buyers and a lot of customers, how do we create an ecosystem where we now can do more by knowing who those customers are, to give them a more customized and more tailored experience? And we are joined in that journey, that we don't do one step forward without Salesforce and Deloitte in that. And I think that's clearly something that we think is an opportunity for us to actually have a real transformational impact on the Olympic and Paralympic movements. Or how do we actually help everyone that's involved in this, give them more to details and more data and more knowledge about how best to engage with their customer and ultimately potential customers. So it's a big initiative for us, and something we think very has a lot of real legs.
You're speaking our language. That's what we do every day, is study the fan and understand their behaviors and be informed. If you know who your fans are, you could better service them, invest in the right technologies, experiences that obviously deliver that personalized attention. So I'm happy you're down that path. That's, we're obviously massive advocates for know who your fans are and engage them in the ways they want to be engaged, engage the communities. We're shifting more from the individual to the group, because as you know, sports is such a, it's built around communities and increasingly around digital communities. So I love that you're already working with partners to understand, which is what I love. Again, you have the benefit. I always reference you, Kathy. I'm like, it's the best job, because usually you're just putting out fires if you're the commissioner or the CEO. Like Kathy Carter's got years to plan, and she doesn't have to build anything. There's no, not to put any pressure on you, but like you can actually think and plan, and that's why I'm so excited for years down the line when I take my boys to the Olympics. In LA to see the Olympics and Paralympics, with all this planning you're going to put to bear.
Yeah, the greatest challenge with this, as you know better than anybody, Angela, when you're an organizing committee, versus when you're in a team sport or you're in a league, you do it again and again and again. So yes, we have now we still have 6.5 years to plan, but we only get one shot to do it right.
No shots on goal. They get shots on goal every day.
We only get one shot on this goal. That's right. That's the other side of the coin. So I agree with you that we've got a really incredible, and that's, by the way, that's what gets us, everybody that works with us gets us up in the morning, and I think is what we dream about when we go to sleep at night, is all the great things and this incredible ball of clay that we have but we got to get it right.
And in some ways, this OCOG is like the athletes themselves, or they're training. Yeah, maybe it's their lifetime or every 4 years, but it's like they got to show up on that given day without as many shots on net. They're not playing as many games as a pro athlete. You got to show up. And I've been on games where we show up and days where we don't, and you don't get it back.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other piece for us, when we think about, you bring up a great point, that the commonality of what we're doing from an organizing perspective to what our athletes experience. And I think that's the other piece of the equation for us is, as we think about the planning. So outside of what kind of impact we can have on the community, and this better than anybody, being the great Olympian that you are, like what we hear is, how we actually reduce the friction for the athletes during our games will have as much of an impact because of their ability then to perform at their peak. And so as simple as, if you lose your key to your dorm room or you're in the athlete village, like what can we do to make all of this stuff easier? Yep. And I think that's the other side of the coin for us. Yes, we're very focused on the consumer. Yes, we're very focused on the impact on the community. But at the end of the day, where the magic actually happens is if we take care of our athletes.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned that. When I was working as the chief strategy officer and working closely with Janet Evans, I don't want to give some props to, who's now, I believe, chief athlete officer. I know this is like her. There's literally someone that thinks about this every single day and brainstorms, I'm sure, with you to build this. And this isn't like, oh, last minute, let's figure it out and put out a fire. This is really, let's put the athletes at the center of the Olympics.
Well, and I'll give Janet continued props as you were just doing. I think, she's already had an impact when we think about, the tech roadmap that we have, which, yes, is about, timing and scoring, but we're thinking about it not just then as in terms of the stakeholder experiences and how we build for that. And the athletes are the first on that list. Like, what do we do to make sure that from a technology standpoint, we're solving the future problems that through systems and technology in ways that, we may have just a beat longer to think about that than a traditional organizing committee.
And again, being the former chair of the Athletes Commission will pay dividends as a legacy to pass on to the next organizing committee. So they're not starting from scratch. And yeah, I'm excited for that because it may seem small. Oh, a piece of technology, a wayfinding app, something that, where do I get to my key? But all those little frictions, all those little problems, if you could mitigate, I mean, that's at the end of the day, you want to be there to perform, not to jump through hoops and hurdles and be distracted. So anyway, I'm excited for what's to come on that piece of it. I want to ask quickly, it was recently announced there's 3 permanent sports now. You have a skateboard in your background there, I see. Talk about the sports and why they were important to LA28 and kind of what the planning is for maybe those new sports that we might think about that don't include. Well, I'll let you take it away. What are the 3? What are you thinking about for new ones?
Sure. Well, just so to give some context, the way that it's not, there's an entire process by which you determine what are the events that actually occurred during the games in 2028. And so you've got this interesting process called the identification of the core sports. And so just this past, I think it was last week or the week before last, the executive board of the IOC made a recommendation that will go in front of the full membership in the game in Beijing for their recommendation of what the core sports program will be for LA28. And we had worked very closely with the IOC to support the addition of, as you were getting to, surf, skate, and sport climbing, as we like to say, the 3 S's. And have those included as a part of the core sports for the LA Games. And that was important to us because obviously, certainly surf and skate, you could argue that Los Angeles is actually the birthplace of those sports. So for us to have those included into the games, and sport climbing, which we thought was just a terrific addition in Tokyo, we think is a really good chance for us to showcase the history, the heritage, and sort of the impact that Los Angeles has had on sport in a way that isn't just about having gold medalists or having participants or whatever it may be, but it's cultural for us. Yeah. And so that's something we're very, very excited about. I think we'll have a really good shot to engage a lot of people in the community around the experience of those sports.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And when I was on the executive board, I remember having those three proposed as temporary sports for Tokyo, and you saw the success. And the criteria we used were youthful, gender equity, and urban. Again, trying to be more inclusive, if you will, and thinking about, again, where kids are these days in those three sports. LA is going to do extremely well. So I'm so excited for LA to have that. But I want to touch on that middle part, gender, because you serve on our women's sports and our women's leadership board is such a big part of, I know how you're approaching LA28, both from the Olympics and Paralympic side, and just this idea of like inclusivity. If you want to bring the Paralympics into the fold and make sure they get the same spotlight that the Olympics give. Tell me about that angle with LA28 and how important it is to you to make sure all athletes have, equal spotlight, equal opportunity, and that fans then as an extension are inspired in equal ways. I always say if your organization isn't reflective of your fan base, there's a problem, because you might not have the same thinking that, an expectation. So tell me about how you believe the Paralympics are going to have the same sort of platform, and that all athletes, no matter gender, race, ethnicity, are really going to have that opportunity to shine in 28.
Well, that's the beauty of the Olympic Games, and I'll bring the Paralympics. So to start with, I mean, the commonality of the experience of all the athletes is, and everybody lives in the athlete village, and the sport, everybody abides by the same rules and the same sporting confines. And so it's really this amalgamation of people, whether they're small, tall, big or little, and no matter what their religious or ethnic heritage is, it doesn't matter. If you're an athlete, you're an athlete, you're an athlete. And so the rules are the same no matter who you are. Which I think is really the beauty of the Olympic Games. And we obviously in Los Angeles, will be the third time that we host the games. So 32, 84, and then obviously 28. But it'll be the first time that we actually have an opportunity to round out, like you said, equality and inclusion. It'll be the first time we actually host the Paralympic Games. 84, they did a little bit of a they did an exhibit, if you will, but it wasn't an official Paralympics. And so in 2028, when we host the Paralympic Games, I think we'll be able to, much like the Olympics has been able to do from a gender equity perspective, we will be able to do that from a disability standpoint and recognize that the commitment to your craft is the same whether you are in a wheelchair or you are are visibly you have visible vision affected athlete. So there's just an opportunity for us to showcase that no matter what, you have the same commitment to competition and to perfection or to your craft, and that you can do that regardless of what challenges that you face. So we couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to really shine a light on the Paralympics. We think it's a great time for the United States as well, and for the broader world to see how and what we can do around equality, inclusion, diversity, and just the potential for the human spirit to actually persevere and deliver. It's not blind to color, creed, or ability.
Spoken like a true CEO, Kathy Carter, CEO LA28. What's your I'm gonna off the cuff, what's your favorite Olympic, Paralympic moment? Do you have one that you remember watching? You got to have one. I know you can't pick favorites, but I'm asking you to pick favorite.
Well, for me, soccer is always my easiest way for me to come back. I mean, I was very fortunate to be in 1996 when the U.S. women won the gold medal in Atlanta. In my mind, 1996 was the starting gate for what women's soccer has become, not just domestically, but even globally. And I think, credit goes to the Olympic movement for including women's soccer in that. And so to be there in that stadium after a lifetime of participating and to be in the sport, even professionally at that point, to see our U.S. women stand up in 1996 and actually get that gold medal was really something quite remarkable for me.
Yeah, I was watching at home. I was 16 and I went on to compete in the 98 Olympics 2 years later. That was my moment too, because it was the first time I saw women competing and winning, and we're in Team USA, and there was nothing for me to look at on the hockey side of the world. But I remember the soccer team I couldn't imagine being there live. I was in London. I actually got to give the medals in London to the soccer team, and a packed stadium, and they're all there for women's soccer. It was amazing.
Well, Angela, I was there too in 2012 when they got that, and you're in Wembley of all places. So cool. I mean, you could argue is one of the most iconic of football venues, and to have them win there, it was just a cool experience. And but that, to me, 1996, that was it. That was it.
Totally. A question on that then, because you're familiar with our research around the FAN project we recently did to look at the market of women's sports, specifically in the fans of women's sports. And I compared a lot to, if you think about the market opportunity for the women's sector, I look no further than kind of the Olympic platform that's been given to, and now increasing the Paralympic platform. But you do sports differently. You tell stories. You don't maybe know who these athletes are going into it, or the countries or the context, but somehow we're able to bring out droves of fans and people that love. I think the latest statistic, over 3 billion people watched the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. You do sports differently in your world than what we typically see on an ESPN or a professional team. And we're advocating through our research to say, don't lift and shift just the typical model, think outside of the box. And I look no further. And anyway, you and I were both in that arena. We see that there's opportunity. How is the Olympic property different than what you typically see in the day-to-day sports ecosystem?
Well, I think what is both the good and the bad is so I think what is the opportunity is also the challenge, is that it is this every 4 years you have this moment that the world stops.
Yeah.
And we saw it in Tokyo, even as you start to look at athletes normalizing a conversation around mental health, as an example. And that wasn't just, we saw it with Michael Phelps in Rio, but we saw it in a much more technicolor in Tokyo. And so that platform and what it means on a global level, and the way that those stories are told, because the moment isn't repeatable next week or next month or next year. It becomes repeatable 4 years. We're seeing a lot of articles today about Chloe Kim, and there were 4 years between what she did in Pyeongchang and what we hope she'll do this winter in Beijing. But you think about it in that context, and so these stories are bigger than life. But we have to recognize that there's a period of time that actually happens in between the flames, as we like to say. And I think we can do more to tell, because there are so many more stories about these athletes. And we saw that even with Tokyo, when you said you saw these athletes that had to persevere in order to train because of the pandemic. So I think that it's a different type of conversation, because it's not the machine of our well-known leagues across not just our country, but across the world, where it's day in and day out, the training, the competition. And so there's something that's unique and special about the Olympic, and certainly the Paralympic movement, that I think there's just this incredible richness to tell these really engaging human stories.
Yeah. And a whole bunch of people that want that love to learn about that are inspired and normalize, the conversations around mental health or anxiety or depression, or the things that we all as, people experience. So,
and I think that's what's unique about this. What we saw, now we have people that are able to speak more freely about some of the challenges they face, where before it was just, it was sort of this taboo subject, and it's not. It's actually okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And credit goes to our Olympians, who actually sort of brought that front and center, so we can, as a society, continue to provide support for all of our colleagues, or all of our friends, or all of our family members.
Well, I can't say enough. You're going to give the world that platform in 2028, and the lead up to it, and the 160 million already going into youth sports in LA. And I love that athletes are at the core. You're using data. You're thinking about how to leave the world a better place, whether it's your sustainability model or passing on something to the next organizing committee. So Kathy Carter, keep doing what you're doing. One last question before we do 4 with 4, which is my little innovation, drop at the end. We haven't talked a lot about like the tech specifically, and maybe you want to leave us with some sort of like tech drop, but the metaverse in a few years, or I know when we were bidding, we talked about all these ways we could bring the two venues together, and there's the blockchain. I mean, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but lay some tech on me, lay something that maybe you don't have all figured out today, but you're working on, and you promise to have something really cool in 6.5 years.
Well, I think if we can, again, the frictionless experience, and I mentioned it for the athletes, but if we can achieve that for the fans as well, and all the stakeholders that come to our games in a way that they actually know where things are. And I think technology is the only way to enable that. The bar isn't that high. So I think for us to achieve, because it's hard. I mean, you're setting up an organizing committee and you're setting up an organization to manage an event of this size and scale. It's the equivalent of 3 Super Bowls every single day. And, but that being said, I think with a little bit of the extra time that we have and not having to build facilities, we can focus on not just how do we get timing and scoring right, but how is it that a fan can come to the games and actually know where they can get their shirt that they want to buy. And it's simple stuff, but I think there'll be a lot of other things that we think about, whether it's blockchain or crypto or NFTs or any of those types of things, and how do we incorporate some of that into the experience and the metaverse. There'll become a point where we got to put a pin in it and say, okay, we're going to plan because technology changes so fast that we'll have to say we're going to build it on this now where we are today, but we're not there yet. So we're letting it continue to evolve and expand.
Yeah. All right. Well, lots to come. I'm excited. I can't let you go without dropping innovation to us. Tell us what you think innovation means to you.
Well, innovation in my mind is a buzzy word. And so we talk about it a lot. You guys talk about it a lot, but it's actually when we bring, I think a lot of times it's when we bring great people together with a lot of intelligence and information, and we collaborate from various sides of the proverbial coin. And as a result of that collaboration creates opportunity to do things that have never been done before. And I think we're hopefully creating that environment where people feel safe to actually step outside of the normal and figure out why not. As opposed to asking why, we ask a lot of times why not. And I think our hope is as a result of that, we'll get some pretty innovative experiences as a result of what we do in 28.
I love it. How about a person, someone that's inspired you or you look up to, that's you think changing the game for the sportsing industry?
Well, I think you can look no further. I mean, and I would say broader than sport, but I think what Elon Musk continues to do is pretty innovative, and without question is going to have an impact. Already has had an impact on so many industries. Certainly from a sporting perspective, I mean, there's no shortage, but I fail to go past what Rubin is doing, Michael Rubin and the guys at Fanatics. I mean, and just the way he continues to think about 7 or 8 years ahead of it. They're not at a point where they can deliver against all his vision, but I think he's got the capacity to build the organization that can. And I think he's doing an incredible job of rethinking what was and starting to think about what could be. Yeah.
He just, I think, got named top mind or top person in sports this year, Sports Business Journal. I think I just read. Anytime I hear him talk too, I agree. I'm like listening. I'm like, what's this guy thinking? This guy knows something. We should pay attention. So I love that answer. What about innovative company in our space or outside? Doesn't have to be in sports.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with our, I'm hard pressed to think past the NFL, as odd as that is. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it is as much about innovation as it is an understanding of potentially what tomorrow will bring and how not to hamstring progress and their ability to continue to evolve and innovate beyond where we are today. I think is really, and if you'd asked me a year or two ago, I wouldn't have said that, but I give them incredible props today in terms of where they sometimes take a minute before they dive in. And part of that is, I think, in part to figure out, okay, where's the landscape going to go so that we are not giving too much away so we can continue to grow, as opposed to find ourselves in a situation where somebody's got too much and they can't actually take advantage of everything. And I think they've just done a really, really impressive job.
All right. Well, you sort of answered my final question. Team, league, federation outside of LA28 that you are looking at studying respect. Is there anyone else on the horizon?
Well,
You can't say
of course,
federation, I guess. You're not
yeah,
allowed to.
yeah, I can't do that. I can't pick favorites there, but I would say I can never go past my folks over in soccer and what MLS continues to do. But that's a bit of a homer answer, I realize.
That's okay. Give me the homer answer. Tell me why. Tell me
Yeah, no,
why.
I think, listen, I think what they're doing and continue to do, and again, I've seen the inside of that one in a world where over 200 countries have leagues and federations and the like. 220, I think, is the number today. For them to have done and built and grown the league to the level that it is. I was just at MLS Cup this past weekend, and to see just 25,000 massive fans in Portland, Oregon, the Timbers Army hanging on every moment of that match. It's there's miles to go, as there are in everything we all do. But I think credit goes to them. 25, 26 years in now, quite impressive what's been done there and what continues to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kathy Carter, CEO of the LA28 and of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic properties. Thanks for dropping your wisdom on us, talking tech, innovation, inclusion. Thank you for all you do for women in sport, the leadership, just being visible, just being you by not doing anything, but just being you. You're helping the sports industry, and for your participation on what we're trying to build at Sports Innovation Lab. I don't know. I'm saying I want to just give you some love, because I know you got a hard job, even though you have 6.5 years to plan. You got a big organization. You got 15,000 beds to fill and villages to build and scale ahead of you. So I'm just sending you lots of positive vibes, because you're perfect for the job, and I just can't wait to see what's next for you in LA28. So thank you for being on the podcast and just being you, Kathy.
I really appreciate it, Angela, and congratulations to you for everything you continue to do and build. And I should say, don't scare me, because I only know what I know, and you've actually lived inside the athlete village numerous times, and so you have a different level of authority to tell me that all the things you rattled off, and only half of those I actually know about. So now you freaked me out as I go back to work for the rest of the day.
Village. It is a village.
It definitely takes a village.
All right. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Angela.
Once again, thanks to Kathy Carter. If you're listening, thank you for your time, your insights, your vision. I love, obviously, come on, I'm 4-time Olympian, former IOC member. I Olympics, Paralympics, they're all in my blood now. So anytime I get to talk Olympics, I'm like over the moon. And with someone that is like in the weeds in every extent possible, building out what aspirationally really will be the best Olympic and Paralympic games ever. So there's quite a few years ahead. I know hopefully this podcast and Kathy's wisdom will let us all see where the puck is headed for those Olympic and Paralympic games. But I know I'll be following very closely to try to figure out, what are the new enhanced ways technology is going to be a part of that strategy? What are the new and innovative ways that the athletes are going to be brought in, and the fans, as this is a fan podcast, the world, how is the world going to be able to touch, feel, and taste and really feel a part of that experience? So Kathy, you and your team, I'm sure are going to crush it. I'm following, as you know. Reach out to us if we can do anything. And I know everyone that's listening is going to be there either in person or tuning in. So big things to come, but want to wrap by just thanking my producer, Jack Barlow. You rock. You rock. I don't even have to say it. I say it every podcast, but you rock. You're the best. Jack Barlow. He's a good guy. If you don't know him, you're going to see him in front of the camera soon. So stay tuned on that. But want to also close by thanking my listeners. Hopefully you're enjoying the first edition of the podcast in 2022. Ping us on all our social channels, my social channels. Let us know who do you want to see, what you want next, how we can help you. Again, our vision is to empower the sports industry to be a better version of itself. Tell me what that means for you. Please reach out. Tell me specifically what you need to know, how we can do it through this podcast or through my company. We want to change the industry for the better, and that is using data and insights. It's also diving into areas like women's sports and sustainability and other areas that we think are pivotally important for the future of sports. So we are working on that every single day, trying to build the ultimate fan intelligence platform to help you and to help all of us really understand where the future of sport lies. So thank you for being here. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday season, and can't wait to continue this journey with you on the Fluid Fan Podcast.